It's alive! It's alive!
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Where did Mary Shelley really get her idea for Frankenstein? And now that the Jewish holidays are over, what do we do? This is Rabbi Yossi Madvig, and you're listening to Jews Did It First. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please subscribe and leave a review. Also, if you'd like to donate to help contribute to the podcast, please go to jewishoswego.org/JewsDidItFirst. Just click on the Make a Donation button in the upper right-hand corner. Well, it's finally October. I've been waiting to share a bunch of great Jews Did It First episodes with an October theme. So for the next few weeks, I'll cover some famous monsters that have been scaring and captivating audiences for centuries that have some surprising origins. Kicking off the series with perhaps the most famous of all monsters, and that is Frankenstein. I know, technically the scientist's name was Frankenstein, not the monster. In the book, he's called all sorts of different things, creature, monster, demon, all sorts of stuff like that. But it's kind of become accepted usage that the monster himself can be called Frankenstein, so cut me some slack here. Most people know that the author of the original book was Mary Shelley, and the first edition of the novel she published anonymously. That was in London on January 1st, 1818, and she was 20 years old. Her name appeared on the book for the first time 3 years later. It's considered by some to be really the first modern science fiction work. There has been some sort of science fiction type stuff before that, but nothing that really spawned into what this became, which really gave it that modern sci-fi feel. The basic storyline is that, you had this young scientist, Victor Frankenstein. His mother dies of scarlet fever, and he buries himself in his experiments to deal with the grief. And when he's at university, he excels in chemistry and other stuff, and soon he develops this secret technique in order to give life to non-living matter. Eventually, he decides to create this person, and due to the difficulty of being able to make the body parts the right size, he ends up making him extra large. I think he's like 8 feet tall, and he's a big guy. He's very large. And despite him making it, he tried to make all these beautiful things. When he animates the creature, it's this hideous monster. He's got watery white eyes and yellow skin that barely conceals the muscles and blood vessels underneath him. And he's just absolutely repulsed, and he runs away. He leaves. He says, forget it. This is done. But then the monster wakes up and escapes. And there's a whole thing that ensues. There's murder, there's love, betrayal. It's a really great story, but I want to focus on this main part. And that's what I think most people are anyway most familiar with. And besides, that's the part where I'll show how Jews did it first. So, if you look at the subtitle of the book, Frankenstein, you get what is her main inspiration for the novel. She calls it a modern-day Prometheus. Now, what is Prometheus? Prometheus was a Greek god who supposedly he did two things. Well, one real main thing, and the other one was attributed to him, seems a little bit later. The main thing he did was steal fire from Zeus and give it to mankind. So that way, with fire, mankind can now progress and form civilization and so on. And that was very sad. He also was a co-conspirator in the plot against Zeus. He was one of the Titans, and he was banished to the netherworld until Hercules apparently saved him or something like that. But The other thing that he became famous for in some of the later stories is taking clay, whatever, dirt and water, and making people. Now, I'm a little unsure. I mean, she's saying that this was her inspiration. I'm not going to argue with the author. However, with that said, that doesn't seem to be the Frankenstein story. You know, every religion seems to have, maybe I shouldn't say every religion, many world religions, both ancient and modern, primarily ancient, I guess. By modern sense, I mean that they're still practiced today, seems to have this origin story of humankind where the gods, or a god, or just God, depending on which religion you're talking about, make human beings out of the dust of the earth in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, the most common example of this in our culture would be, right, the creation of Adam. God takes dirt and water, and he forms the first man. So that would be, you have a similar situation going on in many other religions, in ancient Egyptian religion, Chinese religion, but also in Greek religion, and Prometheus is supposedly the one who did it. Well, really, if you want to get technical about what she's proposing here in her novel, right, this man, a scientist in our case, who takes inanimate objects and makes one singular living being out of that stuff, right, separate from humans, it's kind of not really human, but humanoid, that is the golem. Now, what is a golem? Perhaps you've heard the word golem. Maybe you think of a golem. Oh, I'm sure actually nowadays everyone's heard of golem because of whatever, Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. But what is a golem? Golem is actually a very old Jewish concept. It's mentioned in the Talmud, which is very, very old, obviously. We're talking 2,000 years, actually, about 2,000 years, 1,500 years. It's mentioned in the Talmud. And how to make a golem is referenced in, not referenced, it's actually tells you how to do it, so to speak, in Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formations. Now, Sefer Yetzirah is an ancient Kabbalistic work, which is, according to tradition, attributed to Abraham. Yes, the original Abraham. So that is, we're talking about 1600 BCE, which predates any of the Greek Prometheus accounts by about 1,000 years. So this is a very old concept in Jewish tradition. And so I think that certainly gives it a place in Jews did it first. Now I'd like to share with you a couple of famous golem stories. Perhaps the most famous golem story is that of the Maharal of Prague. And he was a late 16th century rabbi. The 16th century was the 1500s, okay? That's how long ago we're talking here. So the late 16th century, he supposedly made a golem out of clay from the banks of the Vltava River, and he brought it to life through this Sefer Yetzirah, these incantations. And why did he do it? That was actually in order to defend the Prague ghetto from anti-Semitic attacks and pogroms. Now, there are some different versions of the story, but basically they were either to be expelled or killed under the rule of Rudolph II, who was the Holy Roman Emperor, who, as the joke goes, was neither holy nor Roman. And the golem's name was Joseph in English, and he was called Yossele, the nickname, which, by the way, yours truly, Yossi Madvig, right? Yossele. Now, it's even said that this golem could make himself invisible and summon spirits from the dead. I'm not sure what that's all about, but apparently that's the thing. The rabbi, the Maharal of Prague, eventually, what he would actually do on a regular basis was deactivate the golem on Fridays, so that way he wouldn't be working and desecrating on the Sabbath. And apparently, one time he forgot, and that's I'm not sure exactly what happened, but there is one story where one time he forgot to do it. But eventually he immobilized the golem. So what happened is he has like the name of God written on his mouth or his head somewhere, and the rabbi pulled it from his mouth and immobilized him right in front of the synagogue, and the golem sort of fell to pieces, and the golem's body was stored in the attic in the geniza, which is like a hidden place where you put like it's an option. You can bury holy documents, or you can put them up in a geniza, some sort of safe somewhere, an attic or something like that. And so they put that in the geniza of the old new synagogue, where, I don't know why it's called the old new synagogue, go figure, where it could be restored to life again if they needed it. There was some pressing need. Now, when the attic was renovated in the late 1800s, they supposedly did not find any evidence of the golem, at least not that they're willing to tell us. Some people say that it was stolen from the geniza and it was buried in a graveyard in Prague. There's a recent legend that actually tells of a Nazi going into the synagogue attic during World War II, and he was trying to stab the golem. I guess maybe he had heard these legends. He was afraid the Jews were going to activate him to stop the Nazis, and he went in there to kill this golem, to stab the golem, but instead he died. That's sort of a modern legend. Again, it's not really verifiable. I couldn't tell you whether it happened or not, but it's an interesting story nonetheless. And the attic, of course, is not open to the general public, so good luck trying to get there. That's probably the most famous golem story. And again, that was the late 16th century, so we're talking a couple of hundred years before Mary Shelley wrote her book. Another famous golem story is that of the Golem of Vilna. So there is a story of Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, who lived in Lithuania from 1749 to 1821, and he reported in an introduction to Sifra de Tzniusa that he once presented his teacher, the Vilna Gaon, literally the genius of Vilna, who was a very famous rabbi who lived from 1720 to 1797. He presented to his teacher, the Vilna Gaon, 10 different versions of a certain passage from Sefer Yetzirah, and asked him to determine what was the correct one. And the Vilna Gaon immediately identified the one version as the accurate passage. And the student was totally amazed, and he told his teacher that he should be able to create a live human. He should be able to make a golem with such knowledge. Now, the Gaon actually affirmed Rabbi Chaim Volozhin's comment and said that he actually once began to do that when he was a child. He was before bar mitzvah, before the age of 13. But during the process, he received a sign from heaven ordering him to stop because he was so young. So those are a couple of famous golem stories that I thought were pretty interesting. And again, this is, I think, really the true inspiration for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This begs the question, why wouldn't she say that if it was? Now, I don't know if it really was. Well, first of all, you could argue that, it's a Jewish story, and so maybe, Jewish stories weren't exactly well respected. And anyway, Jews, we know, weren't super well respected. So maybe she didn't want to admit that. Because there were in literary circles, Jewish knowledge did float around. I mean, it's known that many of, certainly most Christian scholars and even people who were sort of laymen but knew quite a bit, were in literary circles, knew of passages of Talmud and so on and so forth. So it is possible that she knew of it. Now, it could also be that there was, it's sort of this this folklore that, everybody may have heard of, but may not know exactly where it came from or anything like that. And then, of course she knows Greek philosophy, or not Greek philosophy, Greek mythology. And so she may have just kind of gone to that. And she may have felt that it was, I'm not sure, maybe she felt it was sacrilegious. I don't really know about Mary Shelley's religious beliefs, but because she's going to go to Prometheus, why not just go to God? I mean, God did the same thing, supposedly. Maybe she felt it was sacrilegious. Maybe she wasn't that religious at all. I don't really know what her exact religious background is. I'm sure, you could probably Google it, but I was too lazy. So there's also an interesting thing to note. It's sort of a Jews did it first, Frankenstein part A, or whatever, part B. There's a silly notion with the golem that he's sort of like Amelia Bedelia. So perhaps we could say that even with Amelia Bedelia, Jews did it first. How so? So, if you're familiar with the Amelia Bedelia stories, they are about this woman, Amelia Bedelia, who takes everything very literally. So, for instance, if you were to tell her to, let's say, whatever, your car is at the shop, you say, "Hey, Amelia Bedelia, can you pick up my car at the shop?" "Sure thing." And she'll go and she'll try to lift it up because you told her to pick up the car. And stuff like that. So she's, this kind of silly, bumbling person. But it all works out in the end. Well, the golem is very similar to that. And there's stories of the golem of Chelm. Chelm is this mythical city in Poland where they say all the silly souls fell into the city of Chelm. And that's where you get these silly people. But the golem there, the golem takes things very literally. So you have to be very careful. In a video that all my kids have the video. It's a story of the golem of Prague that we mentioned earlier. But there's a scene in there where he's told to get fish for Shabbos, and he's going out and collecting fish. But he doesn't come back because he's just told to go get fish. So he's getting fish after fish after fish after fish. So finally, it's almost Shabbos, and someone goes to get him and says, it's enough with the fish. We got to get back for Shabbos. So, we don't need any more fish. Meaning you don't need to get any more fish. Just take what you have and leave. But he hears, we don't need any more fish. So what does he do? Dumps the bucket back into the water after a whole day of getting the fish for Shabbos. So, similarly, maybe we could say that Amelia Bedelia got the concept from the golem. I don't know, but it's something that caught my attention. So, with that, I'll leave you with the golem stories for there. And I want to leave you, of course, with a Devar Torah. So now that the Jewish holidays are over, what do? After all of a month full of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchas Torah, all these exciting holidays, and especially finishing off with the dancing and so on, and then we have Shabbos Bereshis, which is really in a certain sense, a culmination. We start the Torah all over again, and it's a very special Shabbos that the Chabad Rebbeim would say that the way you establish yourself on Shabbos Bereshis, that's the way the whole year will go. And now, we're done. Back to regular, old, everyday life. So how does it work? Well, right after the holidays end, it's customary to say right after Havdalah, right after you do the traditional ceremony to separate between the holy days and the regular days, we say, Yankov halach l'darkei, that Jacob went on his way. This is a verse from the Bible in Genesis, where after Jacob, he sleeps and has the dreams of the angels going up and down the ladder. He gets up, he goes on his way. Where is he going? He's going out of Israel. He's going into his to see his future father-in-law and go raise sheep. He's going on his way, going from the Holy Land of Israel out to make a life for himself. And there, what happens? He meets his wife. They have a few wives. They have lots of children. He establishes a life for himself, etc. The rest is history, as they say. Well, so too with us at this time, that we take all of the special blessings that we drew down through our repentance, through our accepting God as King, through our joy and happiness of receiving the Torah, of being Jewish, of communing with God. We take all those blessings and we have to go on our way. We have to bring that into our everyday life. Especially now, we have the, after Shabbos Bereshis, we now start the Parsha of Noach, of the flood. And we have the waters that represent the Tirdos HaParnasa, the difficulties of making a livelihood. Right now we're going to be hit from all sides. We've got to go back to work. We've got to go on with the daily grind. And how do we do that? With the strength and the blessings that we received from a month long of holidays, of coming close to God, and that will help us bring our coming year, to a whole new level. Rosh Hashanah is called the head of the year, right? Rosh Hashanah. And the Hebrew month is called Tishrei, which has the same letters, sort of, as Reshis, minus the Aleph, which means the beginning. But Resh comes from Rosh, the head. It's not called the beginning. It's called the head. Why is that? Because just like the head contains all of your sensory organs, right? It has the brain. That's obviously the most important thing there. And everything else, your eyes, your ears, your mouth, everything is in your head. The rest of your body, in a certain sense, a lot of wasted space. Everything's so compact in your head. And then the whole rest of the body, what's all that? So too Tishrei. Everything's compact. Everything's shoved into Tishrei. All these holidays. And that's what gives the entire rest of the year life. That's what gives the entire rest of the year the ability to go on and for you to be successful. So I hope all of you gleaned a lot of ruchnius, a lot of spirituality from this month of holidays. And don't worry, even if you don't see it, you don't feel it, mazloyachazi, your soul feels it, and you should know that you have a lot of baggage, a lot of great spiritual baggage that you can now take with you and unpack throughout the year in order to have to have a good and sweet new year, and the good gebenchte year, a blessed year. And I hope to be doing this podcast next week with a new monster. I haven't decided which one I'm going to do yet, but they're all good, don't worry. I wish you all well. Thanks so much for listening. And if you want to continue the conversation, please keep in touch. You could be on the Facebook page, Jews Did It First. You could email me, rabbi@jewishoswego.org. I'm also on Twitter @OswegoRabbi. Until next week, Shavua Tov.